We've got to protect our children. They need our hands. We've got to stand up. Yeah, stand.
Happy New Year. Happy 2026. Ian Mitchell, M3 Show here. I am so excited that you're joining me. I'm super excited about the first quarter, about what we're going to show in January, February, March. We're going to talk about a topic that's deeply personal to me as a father of three who, has really tried to secure my home and keep a safe environment for my kids of all ages, from when they were young to now I have one adult child. Protecting our children from potential exploitation and exposure is important. So that's going to be the focus coming out into the new year. And we're going to have every week really interesting, compelling interviews with experts in the field talking about internet safety and digital safety and game safety and physical safety, all kinds of things. Because as guardians and parents, we have to watch out for the most vulnerable amongst us. So welcome. Welcome to M3. Welcome to Protect Our Children. So happy to have you here in this new year. It's going to be an unbelievable year. I know there's a lot going on in the world, but as far as I'm concerned, we're moving in the right direction, and I hope you feel the same way too. And if you don't, let's hope on. Let's keep praying. My first interview is going to be with Dr. Lisa Strohman, a friend of mine, and I can't think of a better person to kick off this whole series with. She is an expert in internet, especially internet safety with children. She is an absolute expert psychologist. She's worked with the FBI. She is on all kinds of media platforms worldwide. She is broadly considered an expert and just an unbelievable, wonderful, beautiful human being, a parent also. So Dr. Lisa Strohman, she's kicking us off. Enjoy this. I know I sure did. And stay to the end because there are really some practical tips, especially around online safety for us as parents and guardians. Take care of yourself, and hopefully your new year's off to a great start. God bless and enjoy this. So Dr. Lisa, thank you so much for being with me and just agreeing to kick off this, I don't know, that we're this launch of in 2026 about protecting children. I don't think there's a topic that probably hits more home for me than this one. As a father of three, one of my kids at the age of 10 stumbled into pornography, and it's been something that we've had to battle through and secure our homes. My personal exposure around, this crimes of sextortion and all the things that are kind of going on targeting children. When I think about just starting the year off with a focus, I couldn't think of something better to start with than protecting children. And I couldn't think of someone better to start the conversation for the year than you, Dr. Lisa. Thank you for being here. I just appreciate you doing this because I know you speak so often to on so many platforms. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Feel blessed to be here.
So why don't you, for everyone here, you're unbelievably accomplished. If you wouldn't mind just giving some background of, maybe give the folks an insight of why I asked you to kind of kick off this series.
Well, I think generally I'll say like my biggest accomplishment probably is being a mom. I grew up as a small town, kind of farm girl, and decided that as a young child had really difficult circumstances and was homeless and like really went through a lot of struggles. And so as I went through schooling and I got into college, I decided I wanted to be a guardian ad litem, which was leading me into the path of getting a law degree and a psychology degree. So I went to a JD PhD program. And I didn't know anything. Like, I'm the first person in my family to like actually go into that. And so I didn't know what I was really getting myself into, but it was just kind of that day to day, take every opportunity as I can. I worked in Congress as a legislative assistant, passed a bill, realized that Congress was not for me. I'm from California, so the congressmen and senators from California had like a meeting for all of the kids that were on the Hill from California. And literally, I got pulled aside and they're like, you are too aspirational to waste your career here, which I'm very grateful for, because I do think that that policy work probably would have been really helpful. But I also think that I've done a lot more since that. So then I went from there and I went to the FBI, became an honors intern, and I was there and accepted into the profiling unit as their intern. And the unit was called CASCU, Child Abduction Serial Killer Unit. So I had the likes of John Douglas and just amazing like agents in the field of profiling. And it was really like the shift. I was there at the pivotal moment of the shift that went You remember this, Ian, like the pictures on the milk cartons. I'm sure your
Hmm.
audience remembers that. And that would terrify us. Well, I get there and I find out like 80% of those pictures on milk cartons were like parental abductions that had occurred. And, that was the best we could do to kind of like source out information and try to find these kids. And then in 99, I'm there and everything is now becoming digital. It was pre-social media. But we had 100 agents in headquarters at the time, all posing as kids, and 24/7 were like absolutely slammed with cases that were already starting with child pornography. And I just remember I was in my 20s and I was like really terrified at like just kind of the malconaving, like the just like the hatred and the evil that was like on these lanes. So I stayed. I ended up being brought on by the director Free, to become a visiting scholar and do my dissertation with NCMEC, National Center for Missing Exploited Children, and the FBI in concert. I did my dissertation on infant abduction, and it was really kind of that part where we did such a great job in the hospitals. And you have 3 kids. I have 2. Like, we wore bands by the time our kids were born. And that child, there's no possible way that child could leave the hospital without it setting off an alarm, or that child was in that. And so those policy decisions clearly impacted like the society. And so in that CASCU unit, when I was working with the child abduction, we were seeing women abducted in their 9th and 10th month of pregnancy with babies cut out of them and left for dead. And so Louis Free at the time was like, not on my watch. One is too many. So I did the profile of like what these offenders were. And it was really instrumental in teaching me like the consequences, short-term and long-term, of these policies that we're making for our families and for our society and like hospital systems or online. And so I kind of dove really deep into that. And then I was there happily doing my dissertation and pulling out all this kind of awful data and identifying what was going on. And we got a call one morning and Columbine had happened. And Columbine was the critical moment in my life that I decided and I saw what the internet would be for our kids. And I saw what Eric Harris, as banker boxes of data came in that he had published online ahead of time. And I just remember sitting around with all the greatest minds in all of the agencies, Secret Service and SA and FBI, and just looking around and thinking, the adults miss this. We miss this. And the kids were putting it out there. So the internet for me became kind of this, canary in the mine shaft. And I was like, we have to look at the psychology of technology and how technology is impacting our psychology, and how do we like really fundamentally approach it differently. And so from 99 on, I've been really prioritizing that as my area of focus and helping families all across the United States and the world, actually.
Well, first of all, thank you. I think when we get certain callings in our life, and I use that word, it's not something necessarily all of us plan, and it just kind of finds us, and then it resonates with you as a person and a passion, and then having courage to kind of focus on an area that probably wasn't getting a lot of attention, or needed more attention. So thank you. It's interesting when I think about the problem of exploitation, and you're talking about the stories, hospital. When we were growing up, it was the white van, that was pulling up and stealing kids when they were out playing in the front yard or the backyard. And I remember those conversations. But this isn't a new problem, and I think so. The internet maybe has raised the attention on it, but it sounds like even abducting women that are that are pregnant. I had never heard that before. Um, just out of curiosity, do you think this problem is bigger than it was before, or is it more talked about than it was before, and we're aware of it more? Like, where is kind of if I look at in a historical lens, is it more prevalent today than it was prior, or is it now we're more aware of it?
Exploitation of the kids.
Yeah, just in,
Yeah.
in general, yeah. Whether it's abductions or, like you said, influencing their thought patterns. I guess the internet probably has created scale, but what's the magnitude of the problem now versus maybe before?
I think it's 100 times the problem it was before, only because it's access. So if you think about what we were trained to do on the internet, through social media, through these platforms, it was be transparent, share your life, make sure people know what you're doing, connect. Like when Facebook first started, it was amazing. Like right? You would get your family's feed, you could post something about your kids and like your family saw it and everything was great. Now it's suggested content or it is feeds coming into you. And so our children don't have the same experience that we did when the internet first started or social media first started. They now have algorithms that are feeding and polluting and bringing them individuals that are seeking them out through this algorithmic process. And so the scale is 100-fold because the access is 100.
Powered by AI, machine learning, the targeting and profiling. It's the same problem we have on scams. Scams have always been around, and other types of crimes that I've had exposure to. Is it intentional by these systems, by these platform providers? You mentioned Facebook. Do you think it's intentional, or it feels like to me this is just them optimizing their business model for views and likes and attention? And one of the defaults is we've, like the Roblox platform, opened up for these platforms that are easily exploited. I always say, what's intended for good is exploited by the evil ones for evil, and it feels like what's happened, the unintended consequences of optimizing business strategies, and one of them is increasing child exploitation in this example. Does that feel like what it is? It's not.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think and you have to remember 2016, Mark Zuckerberg posted a video of himself and an article came out that talked about how excited he was that he learned that he could take happy users on this platform and make them sad. He could take sad users and make them happy. And he was so excited to share with the world that he went out there very naively and said, like, I can actually like manage emotion. But what he didn't finish that thought on and where it led to was the more emotionally unstable we are as individuals, the more often we engage online. And so it is an awful system that the algorithm actually creates this disassociation between our like true self and the self that everybody thinks we should be. And so therefore it means more engagement, more control, and more access to those people that wouldn't ordinarily be in our feed.
I find that's even true in my life. When I'm going through tough times, I find myself looking to self-medicate with distractions and such, and I'm more vulnerable to all of a sudden looking back going, wow, I just wasted the last hour or 2 hours. And so it's one of those too, that it's when find ourselves vulnerable, we're all vulnerable at different points in our lives, but when we find ourselves vulnerable, there's easy things to fill it. And our children, as a dad of 3, and one of them is an adult now, I'm still figuring this out, and I'm in my late 40s, right? And so when I look at these kids that are still trying to figure out who they are, their identities, their social networks, and their just normal day-to-day human stuff, they're so unequipped to manage these external influences that are profiling them and using fancy algorithms, and maybe not intending for harm, but by default, it's facilitating an opening for evil actors to come in and do harm. It's so dangerous. So when we think about, you mentioned the internet and the power of the internet, it's in our homes. And what are you finding the current, when you interact with, I mean, first let's talk about maybe a little bit about what your kind of day-to-day is, because I know you're helping and you're meeting with clients of yours that are kind of working through tough things. What are you finding in your interactions working with clients? Like, what's the environment that they have at home that is making them more susceptible to falling prey to these crimes? And I'll say this with, for example, on the sextortion problem, I've met with executives that have very healthy home lives, that their children have been targeted. And then I've met with folks that have less healthy home lives and their children are being targeted. Are you finding some sort of theme when we talk about folks watching this, that their home life, their internet environment, accessibility to the internet, not being, very busy parents? Like, what are you seeing there on the home life that maybe makes a child more susceptible to being exploited or targeted?
I think children more often now are being raised in kind of absentee-ish environments. Like parents are very busy. We, now with AI, we can be 10 times more productive than we were before. Therefore, we can get more work done. And there's like this kind of, I see it like this pressure where there's not the quiet time, the time that if you look historically at the psychological data on the health of a family, it really relates back to this like dinner table time. And it really isn't about the fact that we have like a great chef in the family or that, that we're sitting down and the meal is like perfect. But it's really that eyeball to eyeball time with each other without distraction, which was the healthy part of a family. And so with all of these devices and I'm going to tell you, Ian, all the way back into like grad school when the laptop was like released, I remember I was actually a student therapist at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is going to ruin marriages, which it did, like it opened up like this ability to like be in a different world with different people and different things. And so I just think that the vulnerability of it is just that distraction and not like really committing and fundamentally connecting to those that are important in our life. And that's, I try not to come into every session and think that, but I spend my time in clinical work with families and kids and adults. And then I have like a professional practice where I go out, as you said, and speak and educate in schools and in school systems on like, how do we protect our kids there? And in all of that, like you just can't talk about life's problems without like talking about how online influences are impacting us.
Not to be too hard on parents, but I guess there's the technical aspect of making sure that we have the right softwares and internet access and really kind of, but then there is also the presence, like you've talked about that as just being there to be open to have conversations, and being willing to, as a parent, remove distractions for important conversations. It's a tough balance. I mean, I know I struggle with that in my home, in the evenings, just taking it easy and just after a long day working and trying to have an open door policy when my daughter needs to come in and talk to me in the evening. I think I do probably, I don't know, 3 times out of 5, 7 times out of 10 a pretty decent job at it. But at the same time, it's knowing that your kids can come and talk to you and process and work through things. It feels like maybe parents in general maybe need to be a little bit more active and engaged and cultivate time for that connection and to talk about problems, concerns, or just even good things.
Well, and it's also important to remember, like, in my kids, my daughter's a freshman in college, and my son is a junior in high school. My daughter, I went to dinner with last night, and she said, I've like turned everything off, all the notifications. She didn't have social media until she was 18. And she said last night, she's like, Mom, like you did me such a service by not allowing me to have it. Like it is a time waste, and it like takes you into places and puts self-doubt and she's like, and I know better because I'm your kid. And she said, I just really appreciate the fact that you did that. And so, I mean, it took me like 7 years to get that comment from her. Whereas everywhere else, it was like, everybody else has it, Mom, and everybody else is doing it. And it's hard as a parent, but I think like to your point, it's like, there are tools out there and there's like, independent people that are creating softwares and like protections and all of the things, but you have to think you have $1 trillion industry fighting against all of those tools. $1 trillion. Like I also work and consult with one of the law firms that's in the multi-district litigation against Meta, ByteDance, YouTube, like all of the big cases. And I did not take that on lightly because I knew the power of the industry and what it was that they were trying to do. And so, yes, parents have responsibility, but I also have such a soft place in my heart because I have really smart parents. And if they're not computer science majors or people that are in the technical world or work in cybersecurity, they don't really know how to handle it. They don't know how to manage the tools that the industry is giving us. It's just tough. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's our biggest lift, right? Is like giving support to those families that really want to do the right thing and leading them to the place where, hey, this is how you can do it.
Interesting. So what's the balance? We're going to get into some of the tech solutions that are emerging and out there, relying on parental controls on the Apple platform and such can be completely circumvented. One of my children talks to me all the time about how you can get into certain apps and work around internet access and such. And so, you can actually, hack into those parental control devices and even network settings and such. If you have our kids are savvier online than we are and with networks than we are. And so, when I hear that there's kind of a couple solutions you're talking about is have conversations, being involved, interacting with your kids, doing what you can on the technical side. What are kind of some of the things as parents start looking at safeguarding children from these, which I imagine have lasting impacts into adulthood? What are kind of some things that you would suggest as parents, guardians, grandparents that we can start taking measures to not clamp down and make it so rigid for our kids? I didn't have TV in my house for like 7 years because it was actually the teachers that had to have an intervention with me because my kids didn't know pop culture and commercials because there was no TV in our house for years and years. And I'm having to acquiesce on that. But without kind of being so rigid in that respect, what are things that parents can do, grandparents, like I said, to minimize, lessen the risk? Are there some practical things you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it starts with that conversation. I mean, it's a difficult conversation because I think that parents want to assume that our children are innocent. But I say to people all the time, like, I'm in Arizona, and so guns are a big thing here, like right to carry, all of the things. It's kind of the wild, wild west. And when my kids were going to people's houses, I'd say, what is your policy on guns in your house? And what is your technology policy? I'm more terrified at a technology policy in somebody else's house than I am about a gun because children naturally know a gun is a weapon. They naturally can see that that's something that is heavy, it's metal, it's like dangerous. A cell phone, we're walking around with it attached to us at all given times, it looks safe. And that's really the conduit. And I think technology is the gateway. Your son is a perfect example. Our average age in the United States of a child first exposure to porn is now 8. And it's because in second grade, our children are given an assignment to look up a historical figure. So whether it's Martin Luther King or Jesus Christ or whoever, it doesn't matter. They are going to look up, and the porn industry bundles ads to those historic figures, knowing that that is our educational system. There's no way around that except for us teaching the kids, right? And us telling them that this is the thing and getting the schools on board to put in an understanding or that education. So as a parent, I think the primary thing you need to do is be able to have that conversation with your kid. You should be comfortable having the conversation that this will happen. It's not an if, it's a when. It is going, your child will be exposed. You're not going to stop them from that. As much as you think that, and you and I can talk about the tools all we want and some of the great tools that are coming up, if your child's device doesn't have it or a friend's device doesn't have it, your child will get exposed. So how do we have that conversation? And how do we have it, even though it's awkward and even though it's clumsy and all of the things, but we talk to them about how society works and why it works that way and why it isn't healthy for us and why we want to avoid it. Because children in those young ages really want to do good. So I say like that elementary school age is really critical to like have those conversations.
I love that you said that. That's one of the things when I talk to the financial audiences and law enforcement, but even just to parents when I talk them to have awkward conversations. I do that with my kids, especially my boys with this rise of sextortion. At first, the conversations were just uncomfortable, and now it's kind of a joking reminder: don't take a naked picture of yourself. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's something that I try to make sure I keep top of mind because there's only so much I can do from a device perspective. But it's making sure also, I love that you said having an open dialogue where, I remember, I talked to a lot of people my age where awkward conversations were met with shame or let's not talk about it. Let's, hey, I don't want to know this, like that kind of thing. And not really having those tough conversations in the household sets it up for isolation. And as I can talk about all these exploitative crimes, scams and everything, they prey on isolation. They prey on loneliness. And if their only source of getting information is their friend group, their friends are just as susceptible. And like you said, some homes are less controlled or are more open or lax with it. So you start getting your kids learning from environments that maybe have a higher risk profile than you want in your own house. Those awkward conversations are tough though.
They are. And my son is like, Mom, you're being so awkward. I'm like, I talk to kids about this all the time. But it really is important. And I will tell you, like, I have family members, like nephews that like, their father called me one time and said, like, listen, Lisa, like we've listened to you this whole time. We told our kid about it and he's like a hockey player and, busy in sports, all of these things, whatever. And he still did it. And he was like, there was not one time that we didn't take the opportunity to have that conversation. And it just goes to the power. And when you ask me like, what's the parent's responsibility in it? Even the best of parents, even the ones that do all of the conversations will still find themselves often in that position of like, I pray every day for the children that I have not met or don't know that are going through this, that they come to a parent and say, hey, this is happening, because it is the number one predictor in teenagers of suicide. And so it really, really is something that we have to be thoughtful about and really connected to.
So in 2026, I feel an urgency to get the word out in our communities, um, and I've got a friend that I work with through the Noble, and she says not another child is going to die while the financial institutions can do more. And she just reminds us all that as a board, just like this isn't okay. And so this level of urgency is so important. So when we look at how grim, another little side note, I was after I watched Sound of Freedom, I was checking in at a rental aid car company down in Atlanta, and the woman at the desk said, "Hey, have you seen Sound of Freedom?" She saw my pin, and that's what I did, and told her about the human trafficking. She says, my daughter's 16. I don't let her go outside at all by herself anymore, and she's not allowed to go anywhere." And that was her response as a parent, and it felt like kind of a fearful response. So maybe just talk about that for a minute. If somebody's listening to this, what's the difference between responding in fear and making, because I could see that turn into rebellion. You look at that with preachers' kids and such. How does a parent respond in a healthy way after hearing you talk and maybe some of the next kind of more graphic stories from law enforcement and such? Like, what's the right response when our children are at risk and we love them more than anything? What's the right response as a guardian?
Yeah, I typically end my speeches talking about here's what not to do. I'll start out and say we're going to go through a lot of really heavy, difficult things and realities that are happening. And I talk about the stories and like how things happen. And then at the end, and I said, but I promise in the end, there's going to be a solution it's going to be uplifting, and we're going to be hopeful. And that what that solution is not to respond in fear, but to respond aware and with knowledge. I think knowledge is power. And what I've done over the last 15 years is like I've had a program that I go into schools starting in elementary school, so kindergarten through sixth grade, and we do like lessons for kids, and we teach them all of the things. And we have this character called Digi, and he makes all the mistakes. He does the bullying, he does the inappropriate postings, all of the things. The kids are learning from that. And then when they hit middle school, we have a program called Technology Leadership Council, which that puts kids, it's a peer-to-peer mentoring. So what I say to parents, and probably by summer, we're going to have like a consumer forward release of it. But right now in the schools, what we do is we teach the older kids how to become like a reading buddy system in technology training. So we give them the training in middle school and high school of like, hey, these are the things you already know about, because that's what I learned, Ian. Like I would go out and sit in front of 3,000 kids in an auditorium, and I'd have lines of kids lining up and telling me like, I don't want my younger sibling to have this. I don't, here's my thing. Here's what happened to me. This is what happened. So I thought, how do I take that power and that energy and that compassion of these kids that are hurting and turn them into leaders on the campuses? And I think that if we can create this army, because it's the largest and most powerful cohort in history, those kids becoming the speakers and the guides for our younger ones coming up, that's the system that works. And so I tell parents, like, you can't just take it away, because it is that is the future for our kids. They have to be able to understand technology and how to use it, but give them the tools. Let's teach them to be the leaders and teach them how to have voice, whether it's in policy or in trainings or any of those things. So that's my goal, is to make millions of me going out as in the children's section, so that they listen to each other and support each other in this space.
I've got chills. That's powerful, and that's huge. How can folks, if they want to learn more, they want to follow your launch in the summer, kids happen to stumble onto this, or kids needing to evolve, how can they, keep track of your progress and learn more? What would be the best way for them to connect with you?
I would say dcakids.org is my program and in the company that does the stuff for the families. I'm out there. If they Google me with the TED Talks and all of the things, like you know me, Ian, very well. Like if somebody writes to me and asks, I have books on my website that I'm happy, and I'll send to you the QR code that you can put on your platform, and
Would love
that would give them a free digital download of the book. digital distress and give them access to some of the content and in depth of some of the things that we didn't get to talk about today.
So send me whatever links. We'll put it in the description. I do plan on sharing this on because the folks I talk to in the financial sector are parents, grandparents. So I'll make sure that this goes through that sector also in the financial community, and we can get the word out, because if we can't be moved by our children being exploited, this is one that everyone comes when I talk about all the crimes. I mean, there are moms that are pregnant. I remember one conversation at the Federal Reserve, and she was not even, her baby child wasn't even born yet, and this already just concerns her. And so, getting the word out, like you said, knowledge is power. Dr. Lisa, thank you for what you're doing. I'm so excited about the platform that you've built, but it needs to expand. And so people will check out, I'm sure, your site, and let's see how we can make your launch in the summer reach the world, not just the United States. I'm so grateful for you and what you do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Super proud of being a part of your platform as well. So thank you.
If you enjoyed the M3 show and you want to watch all the new releases, click subscribe. You know how it works. Secondly, if you want to support my nonprofit, the one I established to fight human crimes like child exploitation and human trafficking and scams, click the QR code, scan it, make a donation. That would be hugely appreciated. And if you want to stay updated on all the music, again, I release music regularly. Go and click that link in the description, and we're on every major platform: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. You can look up Ian Mitchell. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the support, and I look forward to being with you next time.
We've got to protect our